Hello and welcome to our next segment reading of the Asatru Edda. I am Útgarðaloki, and today in chapter 30 is entitled Útgarðaloki. And this chapter is a tale of one of Thor's many exploits and journeys into Jotunheim. The beginning of his business is that Thor set out with his goats and chariot, and with him the ass called Loki. In the evening they arrived at Egil's house and were given a night's lodging there. During the evening Thor took his goats and slaughtered them both. After this they were skinned and put in the pot. When it was cooked, Thor sat down to the evening meal, he and his companion. Thor invited Egil and Groa and their children to share the meal with him. Egil's son called Thjalfi and his daughter Röskva. Then Thor placed the goat skins on the other side of the fire and instructed Egil and his household to throw the bones onto the goat skins. Thjalfi, Egil's son, enticed by Loki, took hold of the goat's ham bone and split it open with a knife and broke it to get at the marrow. Thor stayed the night there, and in the small hours before dawn he got up and dressed, took his stone hammer, Mjolnir, and raised it and blessed the skins of the goats. Then the goats got up. They had not fared long before one of Hrodi Thor's goats laid down half dead before the car. There the pole horse was lame in its leg, but the false Loki was the cause of this. Thor noticed this and declared that Egil or one of his people must not have treated the goat's bones with proper care. He realized that the ham bone was broken. There is no need to make a long tale about it. Everyone can imagine how Egil felt when he saw his friend Thor making his brows sink down over his eyes as for what could be seen of the eyes themselves. Thor clenched his hands on the shaft of his hammer so that his knuckles went white, and Egil and all his household cried out fervently, offering to atone with all their possessions. Then Thor's wrath left him, and he calmed down and accepted from them in settlement their children Thjalfi and Röskva, and they then became Thor's bondservants, and they have attended him ever since. Now have you heard, for who among them who knew the lore of the Godin can more fully tell? What recompense he got from Egil, he paid for it with both of his children. Thor left the goats behind there, and from then on he would always walk on his way to face Jotnar, leaving his goats behind in Ísetr. He journeyed south towards Sokdalir and Útgarðar, where Surtr and his At had been banished after stealing some of Mimir's mead. He traveled down the Ílafagar, and when he came to the land he went ashore. With him there Loki, Thjalfi, and Röskva. After they had traveled a little while, they came to a large forest. They continued walking along the whole day until dark. Thjalfi, who was faster than anybody else, carried Thor's food bag. They were low on supplies. When it became dark, they looked for a place to spend the night and came across a very large hall. At one end was a door as wide as the hall itself, where they sought quarters for the evening. But in the middle of the night there was a powerful earthquake. The ground heaved under them and the house shook. Thor stood up and called to his companions. They searched and found a side room on the right towards the middle of the hall, where they went in. Thor placed himself in the doorway, and the others, who were scared, stayed further behind him inside. Thor held the hammer by its handle, intending to defend himself. Then he heard a loud noise and a roaring din. At sunrise, Thor went outside and saw a man lying in a forest a short distance from him. The man snored heavily as he slept, and he was not little. Thor then thought he understood the noise he had heard during the night. He put on his belt of strength, and divine power began to swell in him. But just at that moment the man awoke and quickly stood up. It is said that for once Thor was too startled to strike with the hammer. Instead, he asked the man for his name, and the other called himself Screamer. "And I do not need," he said, "to ask your name. I know you are Thor of the Aesir. But have you dragged away my glove?" Screamer reached out and picked up the glove. Thor now saw that during the night he had mistaken his glove for a haul. As for the side room, that was the glove's thumb. Screamer asked if Thor wanted to have his company on the journey, and Thor said yes. Then Screamer took his food bag, untied it, and started to eat his breakfast. Thor and his companions did the same thing elsewhere. Screamer then suggested that they pool their provisions, and Thor agreed. Screamer tied together all their provisions in one bag and threw it over his shoulder. He went during the day, taking rather large strides. Later, towards the evening, Screamer found them in a place for the night under a great oak tree. Screamer then told Thor that he wanted to lie down to sleep, but you take the food bag and prepare your evening meal. Next, Screamer fell asleep snoring loudly, and Thor took the food bag, intending to untie it. There is this to tell, which may seem unbelievable, but Thor could not untie a single knot, nor was he able to loosen any of the straps. None was any looser than when he started. When Thor realized his effort was being wasted, he became angry. Gripping the hammer, Mjolnir with both hands, he strode with one foot in front to where Screamer laid and struck him on the head. But Screamer awoke and asked whether a leaf from a tree had fallen on his head, and whether they had eaten and were prepared to bed down. Thor then realized that they were getting ready to go to sleep. Then they moved to a place under the oak, and it can truly be said that it was not possible to sleep without fear. In the middle of the night, Thor could hear that Screamer was sleeping soundly. The forest thundered with the sounds of his snoring, and Thor stood and went over to him. He quickly raised the hammer and, with a hard blow, struck Screamer in the middle point of his skull. He felt the hammer sink deep into his head. But at that instant, Screamer awoke and said, "What now? Has some acorn fallen on my head? What's new with you, Thor?" Thor quickly moved back and said that he had just awakened, adding that it was the middle of the night and there was still time to sleep. Then Thor resolved that if he could get close enough to strike a third blow, he would arrange matters so that this meeting would be their last one. Thor now lay awake, watching for Screamer to fall asleep. A little before dawn, hearing that Screamer was sleeping, Thor stood up and, running towards Screamer, raised his hammer and, with all of his might, struck Screamer on the temple. The hammer sunk up to the shaft, but then Screamer sat up, brushed off the side of his head, and said, "Are there birds sitting in the tree above me? It seemed to me as I woke that some leaves or twigs from the branches had fallen on my head. Are you awake, Thor? It is time to get up and get dressed. You don't have a long way to go to reach the stronghold, which is called Útgarð. I have heard you whisper among yourselves that I am no small man, and you will see still larger men if you go to Útgarð. Now I will give you some good advice. Do not go arrogantly. The retainers of Útgarðaloki fjallar will not tolerate bragging from such a small fry as you. Your other choice is to turn back, and in my opinion, that would be the best thing for you to do. But if you intend to continue, then head for the east. My path now leads northward to the mountains that you can now see." Skrymmr took the food bag and threw it on his back. He turned sharply and headed north into the forest, leaving the others. In this parting, there is no report that the Aesir mentioned that they were looking forward to meeting him again. Thor and his companions continued on their journey, traveling until midday. Then they saw a fortress standing on a plain, and it was so big that in order to see over it, they had to bend their necks all the way back. They approached the fortress, but the fortress entrance gate was shut. Thor went to the gate and tried to open it, but after struggling to open the stronghold, he finally had to squeeze between the bars. Entering in this way, they saw a large hall and approached it. The door was open, and inside they saw many people sitting on two benches, most of them rather large. They went before the king, Útgarðaloki, or Suttungr, and greeted him, but he took his time in noticing them. Then he said, grinning through his teeth, "News travels slowly from the distant parts. But am I wrong in thinking that this little fellow is Thor? Surely there is more to you than meets the eye. Tell me, companions, in what skills do you think you are capable of competing? No one can stay here with us who does not have some skill or a knowledge greater than other men." They then He who stood at the back of the group, and the one who is called Loki, spoke up. "I have a skill in which I am ready to be tested. No one here in this hall will prove quicker than I at eating his food." Útgarðaloki answered, "That will be an accomplishment, if you are up to it, and feats such as that will be put to the test." Next he called out to the end of the bench to the one called Logi, and told him to come forward onto the floor and pit himself against Loki. Then a trough filled with meat was brought in and set on the hall floor. Loki placed himself at one end and Logi at the other. Each began to eat as fast as they could, and they met in the middle of the trough. Loki had eaten all the meat from the bones, but Logi had not only eaten the meat, but also the bones and even the trough. To everyone it seemed that Loki had lost the contest. Then Útgarðaloki asked in what the youngest could compete. Thjalfi replied that he would run a race against whoever Útgarðaloki chose. Útgarðaloki called that a fine sport, but said that Thjalfi would have to be very quick if he intended to win. Útgarðaloki made it clear that the matter would quickly be put to the test. Next, Útgarðaloki stood up and went outside, where they had a good running course over a flat plain. He called a little fellow named Hugi to come to him and ordered him to race a run against Thjalfi. They ran the first race, and Hugi was so far in the lead that he turned around at the end and faced his opponent. Then Útgarðaloki said, "Thjalfi, you will need to exert yourself more if you are to win the contest. Yet it is true that no one else has come here who has seemed to me faster on his feet than you." Then they began the race a second time. When Hugi came to the end of the course, he turned around, but Thjalfi was behind him by a distance of a longbow shot. Útgarðaloki then said, "I think Thjalfi knows how to run a good race, but I have no faith that he will win. Now comes the test. Let them run the third race." When Hugi reached the end of the race and turned around, Thjalfi had not even reached the midway point of the course. Everyone then said that the contest was over. Útgarðaloki asked Thor what feat he wanted to show them, as so many tales were told about his exploits. Thor answered that he would most like to pit himself against someone in drinking. Útgarðaloki said that this contest could easily be arranged. He went into the hall and called to his cupbearer, telling him to bring the feasting horn from which his retainers usually drank. The cupbearer quickly brought a horn and placed it in Thor's hands. Then Útgarðaloki Fjalar said, "It is thought that drinking from this horn is well done if it is emptied in one drink. Some drain it in two, but no one is such a small-time drinker that he cannot finish it in three." Thor eyed the horn, and it did seem to be very large, and although it was rather long, he was quite thirsty and began to drink, swallowing hugely, and thinking that it would not be necessary to bend himself over the horn more than once. When he had drunk as much as he could, he bent back from the horn and looked in to see how much drink remained. It seemed to him that the level of the horn was only slightly lower than it was at the beginning. Útgarðaloki Fjalar then said, "Good drinking, although not all that much. I would not have believed it if I had not been told that Asatru would not have drunk more. But I know that you will drain it in the second drink." Thor gave no reply, but put the horn to his mouth and resolved to take a larger drink. He struggled with it as long as he could hold his breath, and noticed that he was not able to lift up the bottom of the horn as well as he liked. Then he lowered the horn from his mouth, looked in, and it seemed to him that the level had gone down even less than it had the first time, although there was now enough space at the top of the horn above the liquid to carry the drink without spilling it. Útgarðaloki Fjalar asked, "What now, Thor? Are you going to be so brave that you will take one more sip than is good for you? It seems to me that if you want to take a third drink from the horn, then it will have to be the biggest. But among us here you will not be known as a great man, as the Aesir call you, unless you give a better account of yourself in other contests than it seems to me you are doing in this one." Then Thor grew angry and placed the horn to his mouth and drank with all of his might, continuing as long as he could. When he looked into the horn, he could see at least some difference. Then he gave the horn back and would drink no more. Útgarðaloki Fjalar said, "Clearly your strength is not as great as we thought, but will you still try your hand in any other contests? It is obvious that you are not going to succeed here." Thor replied, "I will make a try at still another game, but when I was home among the Aesir, I would have found it strange if such drinks were called little. What sort of contest will you offer me now?" Útgarðaloki Fjalar replied, "Here among us, little boys do something that is thought a rather small matter, but they must lift my cat off the ground. But I would not have thought it possible to post such a thing to Asatru if I had not already seen that your strength is much less than I thought." Now a gray cat and a rather large one jumped onto the floor of the hall. Thor approached it and placed his hand under the middle of the belly and started to lift the cat. But as much as Thor raised him, the cat arched its back. Then Thor had reached as high as he could, and one of the cat's paws was lifted off the ground. Beyond this effort, Thor could do no more. Then Útgarðaloki Fjalar said, "This contest has gone as I expected it would. The cat is rather large, whereas Thor is short and small compared with the large men among here." Thor replied, "Although you call me little, let someone come forward and wrestle with me. Now I am angry." Útgarðaloki Fjalar looked over the benches and replied, "Here, inside, I do not see any men who would find it dignified to wrestle with you." Then he went on, "But wait, first let us see. Call my nurse, the old woman Ellie, to come here and let Thor wrestle with her, if he wants to. She has thrown to the ground men who seem to me to be no less strong than Thor." Next, an old woman walked into the hall of Útgarðaloki Fjalar, and said she would wrestle with Asatru. The story is not long to tell. The match went this way, and the more Thor threw his strength into grappling, the more steadfast she stood her ground. Then the old crone showed her skill. Thor lost his foot, and the contest grew fierce. It was not long before Thor fell to one knee. Then Útgarðaloki intervened. He told them to stop the contest, saying that there was no need for Thor to challenge others to wrestle in the hall. By then, it was late at night, and Útgarðaloki showed Thor and his companions to places on the benches, and they were treated well for the rest of the night. In the morning, at first light, Thor and his companions stood up, dressed, and prepared to leave. Útgarðaloki then came in and had a table set for them. There is no lack of hospitality as to food or drink. When they finished eating, they turned to leave, and Útgarðaloki stayed with them and accompanied them as they left the fortress. At their parting, Útgarðaloki asked Thor how he thought the trip had gone and whether Thor had ever met a man more powerful. Thor replied that he could not deny that he had been seriously honored in this encounter. Moreover, I know that you will say that I am a person of little account, and that galls me. Then Útgarðaloki replied, Now that you are out of the fortress, I will tell you the truth. For, if I live and am the one to decide, you will never enter it again. On my word, I can assure you that you would never have been allowed to enter if I had known in advance that you had so much power in you, because you nearly brought disaster upon us. I have tricked you with magical shape changings, as I did that first time when I found you in the forest. I am the one you met there, and when you tried to untie the food bag, you were unable to do it because I had fastened it with iron wire. Then you struck me 3 times with the hammer. The first was the least, yet it was so powerful that it would have killed me if it had found its mark. But when you saw a flat-topped mountain near my hall, with 3 square-shaped valleys in it, one deeper than the others, these were the marks of your hammer. I moved this flat-topped mountain in front of your blows, but you did not see me do it. It was the same when your companions contested with my retainers, and so it was in the first contest undertaken by Loki. He was very hungry and ate quickly, but the one called Logi was wildfire itself, and he burned through the trough no less quickly than the meat. When Thaufi ran against the one called Hugi, that was my thought, and Thaufi could not expect it to compete with its speed. When you drank from the horn, you thought it might be slow going, but on my word, that was a miracle I would never have believed could happen. The other end of the horn that you could not see was out in the ocean, and when you come to the ocean, you will see how much your drinking lowered it. This is now known as the tides. Útgarðaloki had still one more to say. I thought it no less a feat when you lifted the cat. Truly, all of those who saw you raise one of the cat's paws off the ground grew fearful, because that cat was not what it seemed to be. It was the Midgard Stormr, which encircles all lands, and from head to tail its length is just enough to round the earth. But you pulled him up so high that he almost reached the sky. It, too, was a real wonder that you remained on your feet for so long during the wrestling. You fell no more than to one knee as you struggled with the crone Ellie, and no one accomplishes that after reaching the point where old age beckons, because no one truly overcomes Ellie or old age. As we part, I can truthfully say that it would be better for us both if you never came again to meet me. The next time, I will defend my stronghold with similar or other trickery, so that you will not get me into your power. When Thor heard this account, he gripped his hammer and raised it into the air, but When he was ready to strike, Útgarðaloki was nowhere to be seen. Then Thor returned to the fortress intending to destroy it, but there he saw a broad, beautiful plain, but no stronghold. Then, turning back, he journeyed until he came once again to Thrudvangur. In truth, it can be said that from then on he was determined to find a way to confront the Midgard stormer, and later on that happened. Thjalfi would take part in many of Thor's adventures and became renowned for his bravery, sharing in Asa God's glory. He was invoked as an ally of Thor and became a representative of cattle driving and agriculture, and is a defender of migrants, colonizers, and settlers. Thjalfi shows farmers where to go and is prayed to when searching for a home or a place to settle. As a warrior and cattle driver, he carries a prod and an axe. His sister Roskva plays an important role in Thor's adventures as well. Thank you for listening to this segment of the Asatru Edda. I hope you enjoyed it. Please support the channel, hit that thumbs up, and subscribe to view all future content. Thank you again for listening in, and we'll see you on the next segment.